Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anime Night in the Dojo. Today's featured show, Sakamoto Days, Season 1.
Yep, Sakamoto Days, Season 1, Episode 15. Welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu. Sage, we're back for more Anime Night in the dojo, and, well, coming off last week, Nagamo has a giant Swiss Army knife. We talked about what could possibly be in his briefcase. That was not high on my list of things. I'm going to have to put that on my list of things that could be in a briefcase. You never know.
But based on what brief glimpse we see of what looks like him fighting in the OP, it seemed like it was some sort of switchblade or something like that. But yeah, Swiss Army knife works.
Right. So that's something. We got to see his dice game. That was cool. Based on the first frame of this episode, which you guys obviously can't see at the moment. It looks like we're in the aftermath of the shrine fight. But, we'll just have to see what comes of that. But as it stands right now, there is only one death row inmate left on that list, and he's kind of in Sakamoto's face right now. And Sakamoto has to learn to fight as Kevin Owens. So we'll just have to see what comes of that. But being comfortable in your own body is important. And what's her name? Mia? The doctor? Like the acupuncturist? Something like that?
I believe so.
Totally Turbo Granny from Dan to Dan, by the way. Is making sure that Sakamoto can fight in two different forms with, no downside. So that should be interesting. But, yeah, going forward, it'll be interesting to see what... I assume this will be the episode where we get whatever the heck Slur was doing, like why he needed this distraction. If it's not this episode, then it would have to be the next one. So, I'm sure we'll probably wrap up the death row inmate stuff here with... what is the guy's name that Sakamoto's fighting? It was...
Apart.
Yeah, Apart, because he's the guy that literally tears people apart. And puts them into nice, neat little pieces. Like nesting dolls or something. It's creepy. But, either way, ready for this one. Should be interesting to see what Sakamoto has to do with fighting with two different combat styles, basically, and not having to go, being able to go serious Sakamoto mode without changing his body type, and just kind of using the two different body types like we talked about last week as two different combat styles of he can have his big tank mode where he can absorb more damage and stuff like that, and then use his slim down mode for more nuanced acrobatic stuff and whatnot. So either way, that being said, let's go ahead and push some buttons, see what's up with this week. So people over on Patreon will get the timer set up and whatnot for you, and people over on YouTube, we will see you on the edit for the discussion and review. So here goes some. Well, alrighty then. We got Apart's backstory, the biggest backstory of any of the death row members here. I mentioned this during the reaction, and whenever you get film grain, which is what you refer to this fuzzy look on the screen here when it comes to this, is what we mentioned it there at the end of the reaction a little bit though, is this definitely doesn't feel like I called it fabricated, but that's not the right word for it. It's Apart, which he already kind of when his dad here was calling him Apart. I can't imagine that was his given name. So it's him superimposing his own version of the events onto his past, and that's how he saw it. So that was probably not the 100% accurate truth as to what happened.
Yeah, no, he's delusional, and I've commented about this on a number of series where perspective plays a big role in things, and you need to be able to identify when you're observing something out of a character's perspective and when you're observing something out of the viewer's perspective. Because the viewer's perspective is omniscient, and you can see things that the characters will never see, and whatever you see is pretty much always accurate. However, if you're viewing things from a character's perspective, things are all sorts of skewed, and depending on the mental state of the character, can be outright wrong. I keep bringing it up, but probably one of the best examples of that in fiction is Monogatari, where that whole freaking series plays on the idea of everything is always out of a character's perspective, and so nothing can ever really be taken as wholly accurate.
Right.
And yes, there's a lot of inconsistencies with this backstory that very much come off as this is just his delusion of what happened, but not actually what happened.
Right. So it had a couple like fairly interesting points that would probably make sense. You know, like a mother that wasn't interested in being a mother, that kind of thing. A dad who genuinely did care about his son, but wasn't around because, you know, typical has, you know, dad has to work and just not around as often as, you know, they would like to be. That's just atypical family stuff, no matter where you are.
The mother is the weird part. We didn't really get enough to fully place the significance of the mother in this, but there is something unusual about her compared to the entire rest of the backstory.
Right. Which, the rest of it, for the most part, is probably a reasonable assumption as to what was going on here. And then, like, the bigger telling part was at the end there with, like, the stuff with the doctor here is, like, traditionally brain scans like this aren't going to give you, like, a, like, look into somebody's psyche outside of, like, hereditary stuff. And we saw with the dad there, he immediately went to anger. So if his dad was like that, then it would make sense that it could have been like a hereditary thing passed on to his son. You know what I mean? So
well, so the big thing I take from this is that most of the backstory is the correct sequence of events. However, the specifics of what's going on in those events isn't wholly accurate. In particular, it seems like Enna did this a lot too, where like characters like to play with subtitles, in that like characters would say one thing, but they'd say it in a different language, and the subtitles would tell you something, but it would tell you something completely different from what they're actually saying. And that seems like a lot of what's going on here throughout this backstory is the events themselves are happening, but a part's delusion is he's not hearing what everyone else is actually saying. He's hearing basically what he wants to hear, or what his mind is feeding him. And like in this situation, I'm pretty sure basically everything that's said here is all in his head. It's not actually what's being said. The whole thing with like, oh no, he's totally normal, according to the doctor, but then his dad freaks out and just loses his shit over it. I'm pretty sure what's actually being said here is the doctor is saying that there is something seriously wrong with him, but his delusion refuses to let him see that. But then when his dad freaks out and attacks the doctor, his delusion can't fill any possible explanation into that. So it just writes his dad off as the bad guy.
right.
And a big reason being for, yes, is once we actually see the x-rays and the fact that he has this like growth in his brain really kind of affirms that what the doctor was saying wasn't accurate.
Right. So this was probably the real bit, is what I was trying to get to, was like, yes, if there is nothing in the scan, then, you know, can't really infer anything. But if this is in the scan, then you can infer like, yeah, hey, this is obviously probably causing an issue. So in the case of the doctor saying, yeah, there's something like majorly wrong with your son because of this thing here, and then the dad can't accept that. So it would be kind of like you said, the mom is probably the biggest anomaly here, because then if everything's supposed to be potentially opposite, then what isn't opposite? Because the kids like making fun of him and stuff like that seems to track. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what is opposite and what's not is the real question.
Yeah, like the kids making fun of him the first time is probably accurate. But then most of the rest of the time of him just sitting there being ostracized from the kids probably isn't. It's probably, once again, his own damaged mental capacities just kind of enforcing the isolation and refusing to let him actually see what they're actually doing. Because once again, after that initial bit of them like making fun of him, he can't hear them anymore. Like he hears some laughs and stuff like that, but he can never actually make out what they're saying.
Yep. So it was definitely an interesting sequence for what it was. So once again, you get stuff like this from time to time, especially like they accentuated it by using like film grain, which is just a way to just kind of passively show that, or subtly show that there's something wrong with this, in this case, the his background. You know what I mean? Like it's not correct. So it was definitely an interesting way to go about it for this character, and like you said, it'll be interesting to see if he is repeating kind of like hard-boiled, that kind of thing. But getting a big backstory like this for these kind of like side characters that don't come back is something that does happen from time to time. But again, it does also come back down to the fact that if he is going to be alive, he's going to need a backstory for whatever, and the Sakamotos have the rule, the no killing rule. So that's just how it was going to turn out. So,
yeah, once again, they didn't even kill Saw. It was the Order that killed Saw.
Yeah. Because once again, Liu and Shin won that fight, but then Saw just kind of bailed and got in the taxi, and he got in the wrong taxi.
Yeah. A big part of this also why like a part might stick around, at least be a minor character or something like that, is the idea. It's supposed to be like the whole idea that like even these like monstrous murderous characters can just go on to have a normal life. Like that's the whole thing with Sakamoto. Like Sakamoto's body count's like in the thousands, but he's still just trying to stick to just living a totally normal life now.
Right. So the only other like major thing out of like this sequence, and I did kind of land on one of the things I wanted to mention, I'm glad they're keeping the like cleanup crew as part of the background process, because introducing things like that to the world and then not like drawing at least like minor attention to them just like from time to time is like kind of like an oof for me. So I'm glad they're back, even if it is like, you know, literally within the next couple episodes that they were like introduced, but still having them in the background doing what they're supposed to be doing, I think is important for the world and the world building and stuff like that. So I'm glad they're there.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that I kind of found as a goof in John Wick, was the fact that they introduced the dinner reservations in the first movie, and they make pretty heavily use of them in the first movie. But then in the follow-up movies, there's only like one random like cameo of them showing up again.
Right. So either way, I'm glad that's still a thing. Hopefully it'll continue to be a thing. But the other thing we were talking about during the reaction too was the last page of this was, you know, them being pitted against each other potentially in the future, assuming they, you know, handled like all the JAA assassins and whatnot in the Order. But these rankings definitely seem to be off, unless we're talking about that's their ranking as a non-assassin kind of deal. Because obviously, as we saw here, this ordering is probably correct, with Saw being the weakest one of them, technically.
Yeah, the way this ranking is that Saw's the weakest, then Dump, then the Crusher guy, and then Apart's the strongest, which we assumed Apart was the strongest.
I mean, he did cut the tower in half with string, so while, you know, the crushing guy was able to like crush a bunch of, what was like his biggest feat, like the table, I guess. I mean, a human being obviously is probably his biggest thing, but from just like a density and hardness perspective, that table or the cash register or whatever that we saw.
Yeah, the cash register was probably the most impressive feat.
Right, but what we saw in this episode with the tower stuff, which again, is the general public in this just so desensitized to the madness that they're just like not concerned with anything anymore? That's like another curiosity, is like, you know, we got we had the freaking cameo from the kids from the spa again. That was hilarious. But yeah, it's just like, you know, oh look, the tower's leaning. It's like, are you guys just assuming that everything's gonna be okay all the time? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, in general, it just seems like the populace is just like, if I'm myself not in immediate danger, then it's fine.
Yeah, I like even the public inside the tower. They're just like, huh, yeah, there's some weird stuff going on. We should probably get out of here. It's like, I mean, there's nonchalant, and then there's just like freaking apathetic as hell. I mean, you'd think you'd be a little concerned. I mean, if you see assassins and stuff like fighting on the tower or whatever's going on, you'd probably want to get out, as opposed to just being a random looky-loo, and just, especially if you're like in the tower and just assuming, yeah, you know, this thing is going on, but they're not trying to kill me, so obviously they're professional enough to not have like any collateral damage. Which, I mean, the old man with the katana just kind of showed up, cut the bottom like corner, like one of the legs off the tower, and then got back in the taxi and went home, because I guess he thought that was it. But
well, that is, he left the fight to Sakamoto. He just showed up and cut a chunk off of the leg to rebalance the tower so that Sakamoto didn't have to deal with it anymore.
Right, yeah. So either way, just the just general, just how the public acts in this is really impressive. And if that just continues to be a thing, I can't wait for the comedy. Because, yeah, you can even see it, like, in this shot, like, there's, like, some moderate concern, like, oh, man, there's some stuff going on. But you'd think you'd be freaking out a little bit more if, like, you're hundreds of feet up in a tower and it's falling over. Just saying.
Well, yeah, like, that was the only time that they like, even did start actually freaking out, was when they realized that the tower itself was in danger of collateral damage.
Yeah. So, I'm sure the cleanup crew would, love to have to deal with putting something like this back together, because let's face it, this is going to need a lot of construction work. You're not just going to be able to put some duct tape on this and the tower is going to be okay. So either way, that was what it was. Moderate hilarity with this situation, but again, no killing rule is in fact a thing. I was right on remembering Granny Mia's name, so yay for me remembering a name. But we got a little bit more on like the JAA's like operation, stuff like that. We kind of called it on like Slur, like wanting to go in and stop the JAA or whatever he's gonna do.
Yeah, but, we assumed that this whole thing was a ploy to either, for him to either be able to catch one of their facilities unguarded, or to draw one of the members out to try to assassinate them.
Right.
Yeah, apparently it is. He's going after one of the facilities, which they did specifically call out as it's not their headquarters, but it is still one of their bigger facilities from the looks of it.
Right. Yeah, it kind of looks like just like a training place kind of deal. Atypical, like office, whatever. But since I landed on the slide, we'll talk about this now. Do most firearms have some sort of recoil? Yes. That kind of pistol right there? Yeah. I'm sorry. Unless we're talking about like some kind of crazy like 50 caliber elephant gun pistol. No. Like, as somebody who has fired a pistol like that, which looks reasonably similar to like a 9mm Glock. And obviously it might have been a little bit higher caliber because you could see when the other guy was like checking the slide. Just no. I don't know what's going on with like some of the stuff with firearms in this. Like Heisuke's gun is what it is, whatever. But like some of the other things, like I don't get it. Like there's a lot of like misconceptions that you see like in just like popular media and stuff like that when it comes to firearms, and it's just like, oh, you have to be like, you have to be very strong to like fire any kind of. No, you don't. You absolutely do not. Look at me. I'm like, back when I fired one of my buddies like very high powered hunting rifles. Okay, I fired it from the shoulder, and this is a hunting rifle designed to take down large game. Again, look at me. It had a little bit of a kick, and I felt it in my shoulder, but it wasn't like the atypical, you see it in movies, oh man, it like dislocated my shoulder, how does anybody do this? No, okay? Like, if I'm any kind of example of being like the like skinny guy that I am, with very little muscle mass for the most part, even a high-powered rifle that is designed to take down big game does not have the kind of kickback that a lot of like Hollywood sensationalism puts out there. You know what I mean? So it's, and especially a pistol like this, I mean, it would be one of those situations where like if you were like a 3-year-old child, then it might have like moderate kickback and you would notice it. You know what I mean? It's just not there.
Yeah, it'd have some recoil, but any sort of trained gunman would be able to compensate for it very easily.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it has to be a pretty damn big gun in order to actually have like serious recoil. Like, like high gauge shotguns can literally knock you on the floor, but if you don't know what you're doing. But generally speaking, yeah, pistols, like unless you're running around with like a 44 or a 357, you're friggin' not really going to actually have any serious issue firing the gun.
Yeah. So that's just another one of those things that just like kind of gets me when they like over sensationalize the recoil of the gun. It's like they're not firing like an old timey pirate cannon. You know what I mean? We're not full, Jack Sparrow over here shooting full broadside with the Black Pearl or something. You know what I mean? We're not firing cannons that are shooting like cannonballs that weigh like, freaking hundreds of pounds. Those things obviously had recoil for, a major recoil for a reason. And yes, that could hurt you, obviously, if you were like to try to like shoulder something like that. But modern firearms are handguns for a reason. They're easy to use and generally speaking, outside of, obviously using it against somebody else, not dangerous to the person firing it in the case of like, oh man, it's going to snap back and like break your shoulder if you fire this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, generally the only like handguns that you really put any like significant risk on the wielder, if not used correctly, is stuff like 44 or 50 cal.
Yeah. So, not saying they're not out there, but just this kind of thing always gets me when I'm just like, listen, man, I've fired a lot of like reasonably high-powered weapons, and just as long as you're in the correct stance and you're like properly trained on how to do it, you're not going to hurt yourself. And even if you're not properly trained, generally not going to hurt yourself either. You know what I mean? If you just like fired it and you obviously wasn't pointed in your general direction. So
yeah, like a 9mm has about enough recoil to potentially throw your aim off, but it's not going to actually be any real difficulty to handle.
Yeah.
As long as you're not just sitting there laying on the freaking trigger as fast as you possibly can, then you're going to be able to get pretty much all your shots on target.
Yeah. So either way, that was just another one of those things. We've talked about it before. It is what it is. It's just being a fan of Archer and how well they did guns in that show. It just when I see stuff like this, I always will like feel like obligated to point out like, hey, this isn't really realistic, even if they have a lot of super powered stuff, like, you know, the feats that Sakamoto pulls off in some of the more powerful characters. Obviously, the firearms in this, you know, even if their firearms are like proportionally stronger and would potentially have like massive recoil for the average person, the super powered characters would still, you know, be affected by them even less than we are in real life. You know what I mean? You think even if that gun right there had the recoil that they were showing off, that wouldn't affect any character like Sakamoto or anything like that. You know what I mean? Because it's just not there. So it's just one of those things that's just like kind of weird to me how they're just going about portraying this kind of thing. So again, really throwaway scene and kind of random and doesn't really matter, but it's still, I still kind of felt like compelled to talk about this kind of thing, because a lot of times when you see like fiction and stuff like this, they over sensationalize the power of firearms, like physical force wise, like recoil wise and stuff like that. So
once again, I've commented on this a number of times, but firearms didn't replace bows and crossbows because they're stronger. They replaced bows and crossbows because they require little to no training.
Yep. So either way, that is what it is. But we got Slur showing up here at JA headquarters with this guy. I know he said his name. It was something with an N, I believe.
It was like Kyako or something like that.
So either way, once again, we mentioned it at the end of the reaction and stuff like that, but as a security guard, what are you doing, man? You just a red schmear now, boss, but seriously, like, if let's replay series of events just really quick here. So you're the security guard for the JAA. You know, public is not supposed to come onto the premises at all. So instead of stopping them as you see these two guys riding up to the totally not Continental building on a bike, instead of stopping them, you let them go to the bike rack, casually approach them, ask them if they have ID or belong to the JA, which is fine, because obviously you're not going to shoot them before you ask, but then they openly admit no, even though Slur said he, you know, there was a moderate comedic moment where he's like, I didn't like that picture, so I threw out my ID. That was hilarious. But
yeah, the Gyako or whatever his name is openly admits that he's not a JAA member and never has been, and Slur openly admits that he's a former member that's gone AWOL.
Yeah, so again, instead of being like, well, according to our bylaws here and stuff like that, I'm supposed to shoot you on sight, so I'm going to tell you this so you can immediately roll for initiative and RKO me. Which, that security guard was obviously going to die either way, but I'm just talking about random incompetence here. You know what I mean? The second they admit they're not supposed to be there and they don't have ID, you have, you know, complete justification to just open fire and do your job. You know what I mean? That's like somebody rolling up to Fort Knox and they don't have ID, and it's just like, okay, blow up the car. You know what I mean? So I just, those kinds of situations like always baffle me. It's like people that are just like afraid to do their job. It's like, hold on, I need to tell you what my job is and totally just give you time to like counter me or whatever. Which again, security guard was going to lose to them either way, because obviously the name security guard was two named characters that are obviously assassins of very high quality. But still, just the premise of the situation just irks me of like, okay, you're just telling them what you're gonna do? Sure.
Yeah, from everything we know, Slur is like up there on like Nagano's level. And in the like ED, we see like Slur with what looks like to basically his like inner circle of like 4 or 5 other people, and Yako's one of them. So presumably his inner circle is all not as strong as him, but probably like on a reasonably close level.
Yep. So either way, that whole situation was what it was, but you know, it will be kind of interesting to see like what's in this building that they're interested in, because we've talked about this before. The rank and file of the JAA seem incompetent as all hell. Remember them telling, well, it wasn't just them, but like the whole Heisuke situation. You're a sniper, you can't be an assassin, I'm going to give you a knife. You're useless here. It's like, it's not my fault you don't know how to manage. You know what I mean? You're giving a sniper a melee weapon and complaining that he's not trained for it. It's like, he's trained as a sniper. Why are you having him in melee combat? What are you doing? And once again, the whole thing with like, you know, an assassin can't only have one gimmick. It's like, every assassin that we've seen has one gimmick. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, from everything we've seen, the only like competent members of the JAA seem to be the higher echelon of assassins, like the top like 10%, and the cleaners.
Yeah. So, I don't know what's in here that Slur's so interested in, because if you're just removing a bunch of incompetence, is that really doing anything? just taking out the like random rank and file workers that are like checking random firearms, or like just doing like run-of-the-mill self-defense classes, or keeping up on the hand-to-hand stuff or whatever, just like the refresher courses. Is that really as important as taking out like a member of the order or something? I'm just saying. You know, I thought it would have made more sense to like get one of the members of the order alone or something like that and do that.
I mean, that still could technically be the plan. Like, we still have 3 members of the order MIA at the moment. One of them could be here technically.
Yeah, I suppose. So, we'll just have to see what happens. But again, we have not been impressed by the rank and file JAA. But every civilian and or at run-of-the-mill JAA member or assassin has not been impressive. It's just been kind of like a weird place to be. This world has weird vibes just across the board when it comes to just like certain things. So it is what it is. But also, only one security guard? Really? There's no redundancy. There's no like somebody up on cams going, hey, Bill just got murdered. Let's send out a team. No.
Yeah, once again, we also don't know how important this facility is, which all we got was just Slur's offhand comment of, well, it's not the headquarters.
There's just like a lot of random inconsistencies that really don't matter that much and don't take away from the enjoyment of it. But when you look at it, you go, that's kind of weird. So.
Presumably, this is just an administrative branch, like, basically front for the JAA. And what we saw is like the Continental is basically like the public space of you go in there and you order your hits or whatever if you don't do it by phone.
Right. So.
Or you pick up your weapons, because that was the other thing that they were talking about here, is that the JAA is also like a major weapon manufacturer.
Yep. So, either way, reasonable enough episode for what it was. And we got ended on, which luckily I didn't miss because of bird turf war outside, I guess. Was apparently Heisuke has all kinds of free time and is hanging out with everybody and is super popular because he's the lovable idiot.
Once again, he's the friendly neighborhood homeless guy.
Yep. So, there you have it. Heisuke is everywhere and nowhere. Surprise, surprise. You're homeless and don't really have a day job. You have a lot of spare time on your hands. Who'd have guessed? So, either way, that's all I got for this one. You got anything else, Age?
I don't think so.
Alrighty then. Well, then, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, beyond however you're watching, we always appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us here in the dojo for more Anime Night in the Sakamoto Days, Season 1, Episode 15. So have a good morning, evening, afternoon. Whatever it is for you, have a good one. See you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.